did it as it is in nature,
Mm-hmm.
a spiral going this way and a spiral going the other
Oh.
way. Okay. And the reason
Counter spiral, right?
I guess you could call it a counter spiral.
Yeah.
Certainly not the DNA spiral of two spirals connected with horizontal elements.
Right.
But when they come out with DNA then, I thought, hell, I'm pretty damn smart. I'm way ahead of the game. Because I know that all the pine trees grow flowers. The most obvious sample of a flower is a sunflower.
That's right.
You look at that blossom and you see spirals of rows of
That's
whatever
right.
they are, one going one way, one going the other way.
Right.
And we lived on a piece of land there in Miami in which we had 27 pine trees. And so there were pine cones all the time. And I'm picking up pine cones and looking at them, and I see the spiral pattern. And it is really so obvious that I'm amazed I can't find anybody else to talk to about. And it coincides with the Fibonacci theory of
Sequence.
numbers.
Right.
So if you count the spirals, if you pick up a pine cone, just happen to have one here, you pick it up and you count. Can you see that row?
Yes.
There's a steep row and there is a slow row.
Right.
The steep one goes from the middle of the base up to the tip in 180 degrees. The slow slope goes 360 degrees to get the same distance. And they meet at the top.
At the top.
And if you count the number of rows, you'll discover that one row has, let's say, 8 rows going up, and the other row has 13 rows going up, and the number of petals on each row, regardless of which way it goes, will be 21. 21 petals going all the way up. And it's that way with
Every single one of them.
every pine cone you pick up.
That's fascinating. I've never noticed that.
No, most people haven't. Of course, they're not an architect.
They're not studying it.
Looking
Right.
at the golden mean.
Right.
And if you take any two, the way the Fibonacci series runs is any number is the sum of the two preceding numbers.
Yes.
Well, that is a 5 to 8, 8 to 13, an approximate golden mean number
Yeah.
of 1 over or 1 under, doesn't matter which way you put them as a ratio. It'll be 1.161 or
The inverse. of it.
0.6,
Right.
the inverse of it, okay?
Yeah.
And that is the classic proportion for openings and so forth and so on that began with the Greeks, okay?
Right.
And so there we have it.
They must have been paying attention to that.
They were probably very, very astute in observing, because that's what we've become. As we become more sophisticated and more knowledgeable, for the most part, we are less capable of observing, or we don't use our observational
Right.
powers.
We don't feel they're necessary anymore.
Yeah.
Well,
So-
thank you for that.
And so this then is a different kind of pine. if you look at these rows here where there are eruptions,
Oh, yes. Yeah.
and you look at the bark is not spiraling.
Right.
And where there were branches, well, these are horizontal rows.
That's right.
Instead of a spiraling pattern,
Right.
this, and I thought that this is the way that tree naturally grew. And I had only found 3 trees like it here in town. I finally decided it was a bishop pine, from what I've got here to research. And I decided, well, that's obvious. Somebody found it, and somebody told them, oh, that's a bishop pine. So they dug it up and brought it to Bishop, okay, or something like that, okay. They have a bishop pine in their front yard.
Yeah, right.
And so, and all 3 of the ones that I know, or knew of, until this week, were gnarly like this.
Yeah.
And I was standing out in the alleyway, I don't know, must have been middle of last week, Wednesday or Thursday, and I looked over my neighbor's roof, and God, there's a bishop pine. And it's easy to identify because all those branches are coming out in horizontal rows,
Yeah.
and the rows are all about 12 inches apart, and this and that, the other thing. And so, God, I ran around the corner. You know, it was only a couple 100 yards away. I ran around the corner, and sure enough. And so then, and I'm telling this to my daughter who lives in Jensen Beach, and she would do, so night before last, she called me, and she said, Daddy, I did some research on the bishop pine. And so she tells me the whole story on the bishop pine. I didn't know this. Bishop in Spanish is obispo.
Oh.
And the reason it was named bishop was it was found in San Luis Obispo and identified and classified and do whatever those people do there in San Luis Obispo.
Right.
And that was the first thing she hit me with, you know. And then she tells me all about this pine, all these stories about the pine. And she doesn't know the pines except from what she learned from me sitting at the dining table, you know, when she was growing up. And she's quite aware of the Fibonacci series numbers. And
I'm
all
sure
that,
she
you know, all that
is.
kind of stuff. And so anyway, she just kept going. And all the stories about this, you know. And she didn't know that some pine cones do not open. They fall to the earth, or they fall onto the needles, and the needles on this tree are so densely populated, okay, it is so densely populated with needles, that it makes a bed.
Mm-hmm.
I knocked a dead branch, broken, that big around, out of the tree to get it because it was in my drawing and I didn't want it there, okay?
And a bunch of pine cones came down.
No.